So it's my great pleasure to get to introduce John Warner back to Bioneers today. In 1955, Life magazine celebrated the glorious coming age of plastics. The article was cheerfully titled, "Throwaway Living." Picture for a moment a smiling family gazing skyward with arms joyously outstretched. Plastic plates, plastic flowers, and plastic diapers float about them like dreams coming true. The caption reads, "In this picture, the objects flying around would normally take 40 hours to clean, except no housewife need bother because it's all designed to be thrown away." Plastic fantastic, a single-use disposable consumer culture by design. What could possibly go wrong? Fast forward to now. Some scientists propose that petrochemical-based plastics comprise a new geologic age. Call it the Plasticine. It's the cellophane prophecy, the time when Earth shall be shrink-wrapped. Not to mention that plastic is now circulating in virtually every living organism. Close to 300 synthetic chemicals are found in the umbilical cord blood of newborns. For the estimated 350,000 synthetic chemicals on the market, regulation is weak to non-existent. Of the 100,000 types of highly toxic PFAs, aka forever chemicals, the cost of cleaning up just one type exceeds the global GDP of $106 trillion. In reality, transforming how we do chemistry not only addresses one of the greatest health and ecological crises of modernity, it's also one of the most readily doable and practically economically sensible in the near term. Enter John Warner. By age 19, he spoke at the National Academy of Sciences and landed on the cover of Celebrity magazine with Boy George. For real. At Princeton, in the medicinal chemistry program, he developed one of the most successful anti-cancer drugs in history. By age 30, he was among the world's most successful industrial chemists. Then tragedy struck. John's beloved 2-year-old son died from a rare birth defect. John was at the top of the game, yet on the night of his son's funeral, he stared at the ceiling, wondering if something he had touched at the lab had caused his son's illness and death. He realized that in his many years of college and grad school, he'd never had a single course in toxicology or environmental mechanisms. He also realized that all the regulation in the world wouldn't stick if there weren't alternatives available. John would go on to become known with Paul Anastas as the co-founders of green chemistry. They wrote the landmark book, Green Chemistry, Theory and Practice, which includes the now iconic 12 Principles of Green Chemistry. John has over 300 patents. He's won countless prestigious awards and taught at multiple universities. In 2025, the world-renowned Technical University in Berlin opened the Chemical Invention Factory / John Warner Center for Startups in Green Chemistry, or they broke ground for it, excuse me. It'll be Europe's largest laboratory infrastructure for transfer and pre-startup teams in green chemistry. John's also launched over a dozen startup businesses. In each case, and this is really big to me, he financed them without venture capital, and he designed them to become worker-owned companies, not stock market IPO plays. I've never heard of that from anywhere else. John calls himself a molecular psychologist. He rejects the standard blunt force regime that uses high temperature, high pressure, and toxic reagents. Instead, he puts the molecule in the couch and he asks, "What would you like to be?" After all, nature's an incomparably more skilled chemist. She does chemistry at room temperature with ambient pressure, using only water as a solvent. What you get from this biomimicry magic is vastly superior performance and safety, along with much lower cost and profitable businesses. What's needed, as John is going to show us, is a radical restructuring of our educational systems and the training of tens of thousands of green chemists. To ramp up green chemistry education, John collaborates with his wife, Amy Cannon, who is his partner and his fellow green chemist, through their nonprofit Benign, which Amy described yesterday. John is also featured in the new documentary called The Plastics Detox on Netflix, and it includes an excerpt of his first appearance at Bioneers in 2014. At that time, Charlotte Brody, one of our board members, introduced John because plastics can cause male infertility. To make the point, Charlotte had 3 people come out on stage just as giant sperm. And this is in the Netflix documentary, so we're really proud of this. So anyway, please join me in welcoming our favorite molecular psychologist, a paragon of good chemistry, John Morter.
Thank you. I'm just so full of gratitude to be embraced by Kenny and Nina and this amazing community. It's just, whoa. I got to start by just a disclaimer that I don't claim to have any gifted insight. I don't claim to have the answers of the world's universal questions. I'm an inventor, all right? And I come at all of this from the perspective of an inventor. I've been doing this for a very long time, almost 35 years or so. So I've come to look at the world in a certain way. And I'm going to, with a bit of vulnerability, share that with you. But I don't, if I ever sound so presumptuous that I'm telling you this is the way the world is, no. This is just what works for me, and I want to share it with people. And if it works for you, that's great. If it doesn't, I'd love to have a conversation about it. And so, the way that I'm looking at it is, we have a problem, all right? Imagine that tomorrow morning, everyone wakes up in the world and every person says, I only want sustainable materials. Every retailer says, we only want to sell sustainable materials. Every manufacturer, every brand, they just get it. And we won. Everybody's on board. Here's the problem. I would argue that maybe about 10% of the technologies are truly sustainable. 90% just aren't, all right? There are a few more coming along, which is good, but I would argue right now in 2026, probably about 85 to 90% of the technologies haven't been invented yet. And so it's not a crisis of desire. It's not a crisis of regulation that we're just going to force people to do the right thing. We haven't figured out how, because we've invented everything not caring about the most important things. And so one of the biggest barriers to a sustainable future is actually invention. And do we have a society that is capable of inventing what we need? All right? So I love the metaphor of the circular economy. And I look at it and I call it the materials ecology, right? We manufacture products, we distribute them, we use them, then we want to collect them and we want to recycle them. But there's a problem with this metaphor of the loop. The loop keeps things in, but it also potentially keeps things out. And if it is true that we need to invent all these technologies, how does invention get through a closed loop? So to me, being the twisted person that I am, I use the metaphor of the Mobius strip and I superimpose the intellectual ecology of what people can do: basic research, applied research, development, scale up, and commercialization. And somehow, somewhere, people making products and people creating knowledge lost their way. And we need to pull them back together again. Industry's over here, academia's over here, creativity's over here, and we need to find a way to join up and work together better. And so the materials ecology and the intellectual ecology somehow has to be one and the same. So the way I've kind of looked at it is, we humans, what do? We take natural resources and we use one of the worst words that I can possibly imagine. We extract materials from natural resources. What a horrible word, all right? But we do that. And we make simple materials from these natural resources. Then chemistry enters. And what do? We synthesize more complicated molecules. Then we take these complicated molecules and we put them together. And we make products. Now, if we could do the best we could possibly do, we would want these products to stay in use and reuse forever. If I was using products that my grandparents used and my grandchildren use it, well, that's starting to get into a sustainable world. But unfortunately, there's this thing called entropy, and things happen. And so every once in a while, all the time, something goes wrong. So then what do? We mechanically recycle. We take things apart, we put things together as much as possible, and that works to a certain extent. And then we do the chemistry in reverse, or at least I wish we could. And this is where I spend my time in the lab, is what I call the materials metabolism. Can we reverse that chemistry so that things can degrade back to the natural resources so that we can maintain stable ecosystems, right? So to me, this isn't a big circle. It's kind of like a pendulum, and when you go clockwise, that's the human-built world, and when we go the opposite direction, it's the natural world. And when you look at this system, it's really 5 different cycles, and that overlap on the bottom, that is an algorithmical assessment of sustainability. The more impact that the human-built world has on the natural world, the more problems we have. So we must be mindful of what's going on at that intersection. All right, and so let's just look at these a little bit more closely. So natural resources. These extractive processes of agriculture, of mining, of petroleum, all these things, what do? We make all those many materials. Now imagine if all those many materials reverted back to water, ammonia, and carbon dioxide and could regrow the agricultural things. Can you imagine if we could do that? But right now, about 90% of the stuff we use doesn't do this. We humans don't know how. Now I need audience participation here, because we humans don't know how. However, nature knows how. Okay? Now, let's go to my favorite part here. All right, the materials metabolism. I want to think about this, okay? So, imagine we're having some wine, some cheese, and some bread. Sorry, I'm back here again. Okay. All right, imagine we're doing this, all right? What's happening biologically? Inside of us, we're turning proteins into amino acids. We're breaking carbohydrates into sugars. We're turning lipids into fatty acids. But that's not all. As we're sitting, eating and drinking and listening to beautiful music and having a conversation, at exactly the same time, in the very same cells, we're growing hair, we're growing fingernails, we're growing blood cells. Nature doesn't separate the construction in the reverse chemistry. Nature does it all at the same time in the same place. You go to a building and you say, oh, this building, they're manufacturing products. And then far, far away, oh, this building, they're recycling products. The day there's a building and you can't tell, are they recycling or are they building? That's when we're going to be sustainable. And so the last part here, this manufacturing. Right now, There's a lot about the circular economy, and can we take products like these multi-complicated products and break them up? We can maybe grind it up, these multi-complicated things, but we can't really separate them and use them the way. We don't know how. And think of the simplest thing like paper. When we take paper and we grind it back up into pulp and we recycle it, every time that cycle happens, we break up the fibers, and so it doesn't work. We humans don't know how, however. So in all of this, I've been a member of the Club of Rome for a very long time, and we do systems thinking as part of the core. Donella Meadows, one of my personal heroes, is one of the founders of, thank you, she's amazing, I miss her daily, but she's the founder of this. But the most important ingredient in systems thinking is humility. Because we can never be smart enough to get it all right. We just have our own capacity to know. And so even if we got all this right, open up the newspapers, listen on the radio, look on the internet, and what do you hear? You hear about all these emissions, all these wastes, all the stuff that went wrong. All right, so can you imagine if we invented ways to capture the emissions, to collect the waste and rechanneled them so that we could do this? We have no clue how to do this. So all of this has to be reinvented. But how in the world are we going to invent? Imagine if a group of us said, let's go make a pond. We humans, we're going to put together a pond. All right? We make this nice pond, it's nice, and every day we measure the pH, we measure the salinity, we look at the biochemistry, we add this, we do this. If we go away and we go on a nice visit to a Bioneers event like this, and we come in, oh no, we're not smart enough to make that, okay? Here is a pond near my house with my wife Amy and my daughter, who would be outraged if she knew she was on this. She's now 13 years old, okay? But look at this pond. Everything about it works. Nature over the millennia balanced the energetics, the molecular construction, the reverse things. It works. How in the world could we do this? Well, I'm optimistic because there is science happening and we're figuring out the chemistry of life. All right? I'd say we're about 5% there. But that's a reason for hope. Why is it so hard? The way that I look at it is, think of you're in the business of inventing products, okay? You want to make something happen in the world. Well, the way I look at it is there's a land of molecules. And far, far away across a huge, huge gap, there is the land of products. And over the last hundreds of years, people in the land of molecules go, do you like this? Do you like this? But it's too far. It actually doesn't make it. And then the people in the land of products go, oh, we got to find new molecules. And they're trying it, but it's too far. And they can't do it. And what I realized some time ago, that if you blow away the mist and you look, it's not so far away. There are what I call the 3 islands of innovation. All right? And it's these islands that next to the land of products, there is the land of materials properties. Now, I'm not going to go crazy on chemistry here, so please bear with me. The materials properties are just, what do you want the product to be? I want it to be blue. I want it to be stretchy. I want it to repel water, whatever. All right? That's still far away from the land of molecules. But engineers, they do this thing, and they look at material mechanisms. Now, again, this is what engineers talk about, mobility, modulus, crystallinity. Still not quite a molecule. But next to that is the land of molecular mechanisms. And these are really crazy words, bond barrier, enthalpy of formation. But now you see, it's still hard. But the jumps aren't that much further apart. And if you want to do sustainability, put it on the list. But if the people inventing don't know the molecular mechanisms, don't know the material mechanisms, how in the world are they going to invent it? All right, so the way I look at it, and I've been using this kind of theory, I could supposedly go and invent the next Apple product. Or, with a bit of humility, I could say, well, gee, we humans, we've been doing a very bad job at this. But for 3.8 billion years, nature's been doing chemistry. Instead of making an Apple product, let's look at an Apple product. All right? And ask ourselves, how did nature create the oxygen barrier, the water vapor barrier, the viscosity, the way things work in nature? And if we, with humility, can ask nature how to make products and then bring that back forward and actually start creating products the way nature would, this still keeps me awake at night, because there's just not enough people with the knowledge of how to do this. So one of my probably my personal hero you met yesterday, Dr. Amy Cannon, and her team are doing just such amazing things, okay? They have what's called the Green Chemistry Commitment. And as she mentioned yesterday, now, was this tiny group of people, there are now 281 colleges and universities that have agreed to change their curriculum and bring this principles of green chemistry and life processes into the required curriculum, not as a nice-to-have elective. So it's Amy, wherever she is. So, you're saying, but I'm not a chemist. This guy's talking about chemistry. I'm not a chemist. And I want to just end with this thought. One of the reasons we're in the shape that we are today is because Western education has embraced the reductionist approach for education. Everything is reducing things to different pieces, all right? But chemistry is really the underpinnings of biology. Biology is the underpinning of neuroscience. Neuroscience is the underpinning of philosophy. Philosophy is the underpinning of mathematics. Mathematics is the underpinning of physics, which is the underpinning of chemistry. There's nothing in the middle. There's nothing reduced here. Every one of you are on this chart, all right? We're not chemists, physicists, neuroscientists, mathematics. We're human, all right? And maybe that's our problem. This reductionist approach is why we're in the place we are today. And if you go out and you walk in the woods or you go on the coast, you don't see math, you don't see biology, you don't see neuroscience, you don't see philosophy. It's everything, all at the same time. And so I am so filled with optimism. We are facing a lot of challenges today. But because of you, and you are showing me that the world is on the right track, and that we do have the ability to solve so many problems. It's not a question of, it's really a question, do we have the will? Do we have the will to make this happen? And when we get despairing, when we do wonder, how in the world are we going to do this? Thank you.